So I'm turning 40 this year, and I thought a great way to kind of just reflect back and think about my journey to my 40th this year is to take you back to where I've come from. And so this is the house that I first landed when I came to Australia. So 1992, this is my auntie's house, number 16, Leander Street, Footscray. And we had nothing. My parents gave up everything in Hai Phong, Vietnam, and we came here with basically no English, nothing up our sleeve at all. And so my parents actually started working for my auntie at home here. So they were sewing machinists. So every Vietnamese who came over really just learnt the craft of sewing and became a self-employed person. And so yeah, this was my time there. I spent a few months there as a 9 or 10-year-old, had no English. I was really lost as well. So when I came, I stayed with my auntie who had 2 of her kids. And I remember fighting with these boys actually. I don't know what was going on, but I felt like alone. I felt like I was the only girl there. There was all these 3 boys there, and my parents straight away went to work. They were just sewing all day, all night. And so, yeah, I was just playing with these kids and we would get into fights and we would scratch each other. And then I straight away went to the school that my cousin went to. And there's an incident that I really remember is that I was really good at maths in Vietnam, because Vietnam, you learn maths really early on. So I already know my times table. But coming to Australia in year 3, they were playing a maths competition where 2 people were in front of the class being asked multiplication questions, like 3 times 3 is whatever. And the faster you are is when you win. It's called shootout, so you go 9 or whatever. And I didn't know any English at all, but when it was my turn, I just pretended that, I'm ready. And then I stood there and next to my cousin wasn't as smart in maths at all. And the teacher apparently asked the question 2 times 2. And I acted like this. I went, and I pretended to know English and just pretending that I was actually thinking about it. And obviously I didn't know what she was saying. And so my cousin got the answer right. And when I got home, I said to my cousin, what was the question? And the teacher said, she said 2 times 2. And I was spewing. I said, oh my God, it's the easiest answer, it's 4. And from that moment on, I said, I am determined to know English as fast as possible because I cannot look dumb like that. And so that was a really a memorable moment for me when I first came to Australia. All right, guys, so today it is so rainy, but in a way it sets the tone for how I really felt when I first came to Australia. It was a quite miserable time. I was so excited to come to Australia thinking it's this land of opportunity, it's going to be full of fun, and somehow in my mind I always imagined like beaches and kids running around with happy family time, quality time. But when I came to Australia, it was all about working, being in the house all the time. And so let me just show you later. This is a house that is next door to the next house that we actually lived in. It looks a lot more like the house that we stayed in, because the actual house that we're stayed in now, they obviously have demolished it because it was such an old house. And so now they've built 2 houses on there. But let me describe you the first house that we rented. It was a weatherboard house. It was broken, like I can see cracks through everywhere. There were mice running around. There were cockroaches. It was even worse than living in Vietnam, I felt. And every day my mum would make me a sandwich with cucumbers and this patty, like ham. Like I remember eating the same thing every single day. And occasionally we get fried rice. And this house reminded me of my journey into being used as a child labor. So at the age of 10, I got curious. I was bored. Obviously, my parents didn't take me anywhere. So I said, okay, can I help you with some sewing? And so they started teaching me how to cut the tag at first. So it was like arts and craft, thinking, oh, this is easy. I'm just cutting some tags. And then next thing they're like, okay, you're really fast. So I'll teach you how to sew the tag onto the pants. And so here I am. Oh, great. Started sewing. And little did they realize it was like, oh my gosh, she's actually could be an employee for us. And so it wasn't fun and game anymore. The next day it was like, hey Lynn, I need you to help with this, I need you to help with that. And at first I just didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I realized later that I literally was working for them, morning and night, every single day, Monday to Sunday. There was no weekends. And the only time that I remember having any happy moments were New Year's. Chinese New Year, they have to take 3 days off because it's kind of bad luck if you don't take it off. You want to set a really great tone for New Year's where you clean the house, spring clean it, and then you stop working so you focus on giving pocket money and go and visit family, and you want to do the right thing so that you set the next year as lucky and happy. And so that's the only time that my parents actually took time off, and that was my only happy time. And during that the time that we lived here, I was miserable. I was really sad. So that's my journey in my first, the first house that I was at. Okay, so we are at the house that my parents managed to actually purchase. I think within like 1 or 2 years, they were able, okay, maybe I'm just overestimating, but overall it's a very short time that they were able to save up for their first house. Remember I told you they just knuckled down, worked so hard because they really wanted to catch up to my aunties who've migrated to Australia maybe a decade before that. And so they really wanted to just catch up and work as hard as possible so that they could purchase their own house. So this was the house that I grew up most of my teenage years in. My parents were really, really strict, didn't let me go out. Which really made me wanted to rebel really early. I was always like wanting to talk to boys, and remember, having a boyfriend really young. At the age of maybe 15 or 16 was when I brought a boyfriend home, and my parents kind of just had to accept it. This house also reminded me of the first time I learnt to drink. I got drunk when I was 16. I came home and my dad actually chased me with a butcher knife because I said, "Dad, I'm drunk." He says, "Drunk people don't tell the truth. Are you on drugs?" So they really didn't believe me and they thought that I was on drugs or something. And so he chased me with a butcher knife, and lucky my uncle was there and stopped him. Otherwise, you never know what would happen there. But this house brought a lot of memory too, because they turned the garage into a full production house where we were just sewing non-stop. And I remember every time we finish a job, I would carry so much load of clothes onto the tables I could just finish off so that I could finish. But after I finish, she's like points out to the van that we had and go, "There's more in the van that's coming." And I was just really upset. I remember sewing my finger into the machine, and my mum would be like, "Oh, that's all right, we'll just, band-aid it." And after sewing on my finger so many times, when I x-rayed it, I actually had a broken bone, like it was actually chipped. And so living in this house was, a lot of bad memories. And it wasn't until I moved to the next house where my parents still live now, was when I started doing my big rebellious, activities, which was sneaking out of home, running away, and then ultimately end up having a baby at the age of 20. And so how do I feel about this reflection? I feel like it's made me who I am, as much as it brought sadness. I mean, this rain really reminds me of the sorrow that I had, but it really has brought so much growth in me, and I wouldn't be who I am without the journey that I've been to. So yeah. Okay, so here we are at the first company that I worked for when I finished uni. So despite me having a son at the age of 20, I still managed to graduate from uni. Only took 6 months off, and then I found myself a really great graduate job. And so in this company, I was paid really, really well, and I was in a company that had thousands of staff, and I felt really proud that I worked for a well-known company. But within 2 or 3 years, I realized that it was this rat race that I didn't belong in. I mean, at the first year, I was lucky that I worked for a really amazing manager who I would say has really molded my leadership skills ability now. So she was someone that was so authentic, was not one of those authoritative leaders. She was fun, she was caring, and I was under her guidance in my first 1 or 2 years working with her. But as soon as she left, I didn't have a great manager, and I ended up really hating my job. And I also just saw people around me who has been in the company for like 30 years or something, and they were miserable. They complained about their job, and yet they were still there. And I just looked at myself and said, I do not want to be like them in 10 years time. And so this is a place where I actually started my first business. So while I was working, I started researching on real estate investment, then about entrepreneurship, and I had the opportunity to start a nail polish business right here. I was on the computer working on the side, and one thing that was really annoying and kind of weird is that I was kind of half working on the business, and yet I was still being praised by the company going, "Oh, you did such a great job." And I'm like, I am not doing this company any justice, because I'm only barely putting in effort, and yet they think I'm great. And I myself am not learning anything here. So if I spend 40 hours here, I'm gonna actually go backwards. I'm not growing. And so I wanted to just, do myself justice and quit this job. Even though I could just pretend I'm working and get paid, I realized that I am going to lose the opportunity to grow as a person. And so I left, and I have not worked for anyone ever since. So I think that was 2009. So goodbye. Hello again, but goodbye again.